Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I am so excited to be spending my weekend with two incredible authors, and so excited that you're joining us this afternoon. I don't know about you, but I am in love with the actual fall weather that we've been receiving. So I hope everyone has had a great Saturday so far. If you don't know me, my name is Stephanie, and I'm the Director of Operations for The Novel Neighbor. If you're not familiar with The Novel Neighbor, we are a locally owned and operated local if you're in St. Louis, but we're an independently owned and operated bookstore that can be found in St. Louis, Missouri. And I am in charge of bringing two incredible authors on screen today for a great conversation. I know so many of you have been purchasing the book that will be at the center of this conversation. But if you haven't, just know that you still can. And we'll get to this in a second, but I just want to hold it up briefly. The Madwomen's Ball. It is an incredible book. We used it, many of you received it as your subscription service for September when it came out. So hopefully we'll have a good mix of people today who have read it or who are planning to read it. So without any further ado, let me introduce our first author. Kira Wilder is the author of Little Bandage Days. She received her BA and MA in English Literature from San Francisco State University. She is also a graduate of the Culinary Institute of America. She worked at Chef Michael Tusk's acclaimed restaurant, Queen's making pasta, and continued working in restaurants until moving with her family to Switzerland, where she is now based. And one thing I want to say really quickly is how cool it is that we get to have a virtual event that's bringing two authors from completely different countries than the United States. Such a fun twist on things. Our second author and the star of today's show, although they are both stars, Victoria Mas, has a master's degree in contemporary literature from Sorbonne. The Madwomen's Ball is her first novel and is the winner of numerous prizes, including the Prix Stanislas and Prix Renaud des Lycines. It has sold more than 175,000 copies in France, with rights sold in 22 countries, and is the basis for the film Les Bals des Folles, directed by Melanie Laurent. Victoria Mas worked in the film industry in the United States, where she lived for 8 years, and she now currently lives in France. So please join me in welcoming Victoria and Kira. Hello, good afternoon, / good evening, I think, for both of you, maybe.
It is the evening.
Thank you so much for being here. I'll let you two get into conversation.
Well, hi, it's a real treat for me to get to talk to you. I was just saying before that I was actually assigned your book in my French class, so this is a full treat for me to get to really meet you. And then getting to read it in English, it was just amazing. And I was going to say, too, in it, just for people out there reading it, one thing to note beforehand, I think, is that you really should find a friend to read this with, because I think, I actually get to talk to you, which is amazing, but this is definitely a book that you will want to talk to people about. Like, you almost can't even stop yourself from talking about it. I think it's compulsively readable, but it's also something that you just want to go out and be like, this happened. I can't, you can't believe it. So yeah, my recommendation is you've got to have somebody to read it with. And then, I just wanted to start. I don't know if you saw it described as this online ever, but I saw that it was being described as One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest meets The Sixth Sense. Did you see that?
No, I have never. That's incredible. It's the first time I'm hearing about this.
Well, I thought that was really descriptive of it. And then, you write such complex female characters. And I just wondered if which character you thought most resembled Jack Nicholson. Maybe we could start there. No, I'm just kidding. No, I was thinking maybe you could just start by describing the ball. Like, you can't believe that I couldn't believe that this happened. I think maybe that's, the best place to start.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for your kind words at the beginning. I hope that people can read it either alone or with a friend. It's even better. Yes, the novel, so The Madwomen's Ball, is, like you said, inspired by actual real events that happened in the late 19th century in Paris, France. So the story is fictional, but it is inspired by especially the Salpêtriere Hospital, which is one of the major hospitals today, which has a very complex and a very dark and a very ancient history, because it's been it was built in the 17th century first as a prison for women, and then it turned into a sort of asylum for women, and then in the late 19th century a hospital for women, mainly women who were said to be hysterical at the time, but also women who were deemed too dangerous or bothering for the families. And so when I learned about the history of the hospital, which I had never heard about before, and especially this ball that was taking place every year. So the Madwomen's Ball is actually the name of the ball. That was a yearly event. It took place for about 20 years. So it was not a one-time thing, you know, it was a sort of tradition of the hospital where all of the women in the different wards, because you had different wards in this hospital, you had the hysterical ward, you had the crazy ward, you had the alienated ward. You have to imagine that this is a very big place, and at some point in the 18th century you had about 10,000 women inside this hospital, just to give you an idea about how big this was. And so every year the women who were patients in this hospital would put on costumes and would be sort of displayed or mingled with the Parisian elite society, who would come to this ball to just see the crazy women from up close, because that's how they called them at the time, the crazy women. So this was basically what I learned about 3 or 4 years ago, and I was just appalled first of all, that I had never heard about this before, and second of all, when I discovered also that this was a very little known fact about Parisian history, and this didn't seem like a small detail of some hospitals' history. It didn't seem just a small fact. It was to me so significant about the time and place and the morals and the social structure of the time that I just really wanted to learn more about it and then talk about it, of course.
Yeah. I mean, it's still in use, right? This building, like people go there to this building like now, right? Like, so this history continues like until
Sure.
right now.
Yeah.
I mean, so is that, you've obviously been there. Were you there for research, or did you go there, before?
I discovered the hospital's history by going over there. I was just taking a friend to the ER, and I just began to walk in. And so you have modern buildings, you have contemporary buildings, and you have the very oldest buildings dating back from the 17th century. And those buildings really struck me because, first of all, like I said, it's so huge. It really does feel like a small district within this district of Paris. You have a chapel, you have a huge park, and you have streets, and there's very, very little cars. So it really does feel like you're back in the 19th, 18th, 17th century. And, there's a very, the atmosphere is very heavy, and it's very dark, and it's very mysterious, and it just appealed to me in some way that I just wanted to learn more about this hospital's history, because the architecture and the structure of the place was so intriguing to me at the time. So yeah, you can still, you can go have a picnic over there if you want to. So it's still very strange to walk through the streets over there and just to imagine what happened there before. Yeah. It's so intriguing. Yeah, it's just fascinating.
Yeah. So, well, I guess they're like, this is the problem, I think, with reading this book. Like, there's two things that I want to ask you at the same time, like right now. So, I mean, I think this is just like definitely something that is just such a conversation starter. Like, I guess going back to when you're talking about the women putting on the costumes, I thought that was like one of, like, there's so many points of nuance in your book. Like, nothing is simple. Nothing is, you don't just enter it with, you don't feel like even you have sort of it all an opinion almost about like, oh, well, I'm going to tell you about what all this means, right? Like it's so open and so sprawling, like the sense of the hospital, but also like the narrative just goes and goes. It goes so deep, and I just thought that scene where you have the women putting on the costumes, it's both that but there's some choice, right? They're choosing a costume. They're excited about it. So I just thought that you're constantly dealing with this, like with the ball, as you're leading up to the ball, you see that there's both like excitement and anticipation. Like this isn't just like you talk about the dark atmosphere. It's definitely there. It's a perfect October, November autumnal read, but it's also, I just thought that was fascinating. I wondered how you sort of balance so much almost ambiguity or nuance, like as you're working on a project like that. And if you had something that you wanted readers to take away about how the women were sort of being displayed, but also looked at, but potentially choosing how they're, dressing for this ball. Like what's your position?
Yes, thank you for saying that. It's all about nuance actually, and it's just the very thin line was not to fall into pathos and not to have an opinion, not only as an author but as a narrator. I don't know how to say that exactly, but if you understood me, that's fine. Yeah. The first, really, the first motivation about writing this book was just to try and tell that these women existed, and I knew so little about them, and the people around me, and basically the public, the general public, didn't really know much about them. So my first motivation was just to try and talk about these women and just say, hey, we know some of Charcot's work, but we have never heard about the women who helped him in his research and in his work. Also, you had this hospital that we know today and that we go to. This used to be a women's hospital where you had many women in need of treatment, of course, but you had also many women who were confined against their will just because they were a burden to their families, or they were too hysterical or too depressed or too independent, and for many different reasons. Women were sent away very easily by their families, and especially by their fathers and brothers. So I felt profound empathy for these women. I felt somehow connected to them very strongly, and I felt that these were my ancestors, and that what they had gone through helped the generations that came after them not to undergo the same treatments. And I also believe that the situation I am in today is sort of they are somehow connected to that, because the suffering and the injustice that they went through, at some points it just stopped, because the methods and what happened in this hospital was deemed obviously unacceptable, and so it just stopped. But these are just basically forgotten figures of Parisian history. But again, it's very easy to feel angry and to feel this injustice very strongly with our modern approach today. So I really wanted to try not to be angry, and just really try and understand what was going on at the time. What was the social structure? What was the moral structure? Why was it deemed acceptable to confine women so easily? And it was all about trying to find nuance and trying to understand the complexity of this hospital, because some women didn't want to go to this hospital. Some women wanted to stay in this hospital. This ball, of course, really does sound like a circus, but also it was a time of relief for women. It was a time where, they would put on costumes and they would see men, and they would mingle with the outside world again, and their symptoms and the feeling of illness would somehow go away for the weeks preceding this ball and the weeks following this ball. So it was all about trying to avoid being black and white, and just try to have different points of views mingling, and just trying to oppose each other, and just try to depict as best as I could this time and place in the late 19th century Paris.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned like women taking refuge and also receiving these treatments that were, terrible, but also women finding refuge. But also, I mean, I think there was one of the most fascinating little passages. I mean, it was only a couple of pages, but it really sticks with you, is the can-can dancer, Jeanne Avril, who was a real person.
Yes.
Who actually finds inspiration, and her life's inspiration in this, and that's just, I mean, as a modern reader who you'd go into it all just like, I can't, I can't believe this. I can't believe this happened. This is just, it was really it really takes you back to meet this person who apparently that was real. I mean, and so I guess that was another question that I had was, I really appreciated that scene with, it's so great when she goes and meets this dancer. It's just a wonderful scene, but it's also, I wondered how you balanced research and writing women that were real, and then also inventing your own characters that were, completely your own. And if you related differently to, the historically based characters versus the characters that are completely your own, or if it was all the same in the end for you.
Yeah. Well, before writing, I did about 2-3 months of research, and I was just reading articles of this time's newspapers, which would talk about the ball and would give me some insight about exactly what was going on within those walls. I read some of Charcot's biographies. I read different biographies by concerning different patients of Charcot. I mean, the famous patients of Charcot, like Augustine and Blanche Whitman. Jane Averill, who went on to become a famous cabaret dancer and in Montmartre, and she was the muse of many artists in the late 19th century Paris. It's actually her life story is she spent 2 years at the Salpêtriere hospital when she was a teenager because she wanted to jump into the Seine, and she was just saved by prostitutes, and then she was taken to it really does feel like an Émile Zola novel, and but this was one of the few testimonies that I could find about this hospital, and she actually had very fond memories of her stay because it was there that she discovered her love for dancing. And I really wanted to involve this character and have her speak basically her words. I mean, of course, she never met Geneviève because she's a fictional character, but it was important to have secondary characters just like her, even in one scene, but who would, just say this hospital is not that bad and it's much more complex, and it brings a sense of security for some women. It actually helped some women. Not all women were confined all their lives. Some of them would go out or would be released at some point. But of course, since the novel is based on real events, I had to, introduce real characters such as the doctors and Dr. Charcot, and even Eugenie when she goes to the library and she's goes looking for this book that's intriguing her. She meets the publisher of the owner of this bookshop, who actually existed, So it was interesting for me to have sort of cameos of real characters who existed, because it would bring a sense of realism also to the novel and have them exist. And but I didn't want to have them say things that perhaps they wouldn't have said, so I just imagined how they would have reacted. But it's just small scenes that would that helped me just structure the novel and just really settle it in this 1885 Paris.
Well, you really feel that, right? Because the first time you meet Eugenie, it's Victor Hugo is sick or something, right? Like
she mentions Victor Hugo.
Yeah, so you're kind of immediately in this, the wider picture as well as just, but you're at her table, right? You're just in a really small scene. You always feel like almost like the windows are open, and obviously not the Salpêtrière, but but you feel always the bigger picture. I mean, I would say as an American, it's really, that's part of fun to sort of, you really, really feel that you're in Paris, feel it. And I was really fascinated. I was fascinated to read that you had worked in the film industry, because it's such a different novel, because at times I almost felt like I was reading a screenplay, because you're so paying so much attention to the light, which of course is a cliche for Americans in Paris. So I was like, oh, but it also feels so real and cinematic, you know. I mean, you're just constant, the visuals in this. And I just don't think I've read many books that construct such intricate visuals, and the lights and I mean, you just feel it. And so it was interesting that you worked in the film industry. And also I wondered how you felt about the movie adaptation, because your book is so visual. I just wondered if it was exciting or felt, you know, different than you had imagined, or how was that to see it?
Well, thank you for your kind words. It was both a challenge and a pleasure to write about this time and place in Paris. And I especially love 19th century literature. So it was just it's been with me during all of my teenage years, and basically reading Maupassant and Émile Zola and Victor Hugo. And so I had this very vivid image of the late 19th century Paris, but of course I just didn't really know if I was going to be able to write about it, of course. But you know, the structure of Paris is such that if you remove cars and if you remove contemporary shops, I mean, you can basically see how it was at the time, because the buildings are there. So it's quite easy. But again, I was just scrolling through paintings and pictures and just constantly reminding myself of the feeling and how it was before. I did not contribute to the movie, and at the very beginning, it was clear to me that I didn't really want to get involved, because I just felt that, you know, an adaptation is up to an artist's point of view, and how somebody is going to take your novel, take your story, and turn it into their own. So I just really wanted, you know, the director Mélanie Laurent to be free in her adaptation and in her writing process. And so I just saw the movie the first time a couple of months ago, and it was just like edited and everything. And I just thought it was such a beautiful movie and such a beautiful adaptation of the book. But again, what struck me, I thought I would be more uncomfortable, or it would feel a little bit weird, of course, to see your novel on screen. But it didn't really feel that way, because she made it so her own, and at the same time it's such loyal adaptation of the book that I really felt like I was just watching a regular movie. You know what I mean? But it was just it really did feel like the novel, but again through somebody else's eyes. And I think it's just so interesting also as a writer to see how she incorporated scenes that were not in the book, but how, you know, she was able to fit them in. And I was, this is interesting, you know, that she was able to talk about this, which was talked about differently in the novel, but she talked about it this way on screen. And, you know, even regarding the narration, I thought it was a very interesting lesson, actually, to see the movie. But it was, I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, I wanted to just do the book.
Yeah.
It's really, you know, it's funny that you say that you could let it go, because I almost didn't want to. I was like, well, I don't know. But it doesn't surprise me at all that you're saying that you were able to, you know, let this other person take the vision, because while you're reading the book, I was impressed. Like, it feels like you have a very light hold on not that you don't know your characters. It just feels like you are not strangling them, you know, your own characters. Like, you're letting them sort of be in the story, and you're not like over determining them almost.
Yes.
Your characters, like the ones that in the book. So I thought it was interesting that you say that you didn't, you know, that you were able to let it go with the movie, but it doesn't surprise me, because you can feel that, and the characters feel very real in the book, and you're not, you're almost letting them be themselves too, which is like the best. So
that's nice. Yes. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So because it's October, I was like, one of the big surprises at the beginning of the book is that there's really ghosts in this book. It is like, it's a ghost story. And of course, on an intellectual level, it makes so much sense, because you're coming in and writing a ghost story. Like, there are real people in this book. So essentially it is by nature, it's a ghost story, right? Your project is a ghost story. But then there really are ghosts in the book, you know, like, which was a surprise at the beginning. And I just wondered at first, when I started to read it, I'm thinking, oh, there's that relationship between, you know, spiritualism and feminism, especially in, well, at least in the US, we have that long history, that there's that relationship. But it didn't exactly feel like that was the right fit for what you were doing. It almost felt like the spiritualism and the ghosts were a freedom and this way out, and it was a door opened in this wall. I mean, for the characters. And I just wondered about your decision. Like, did you know early on that it was going to be a ghost story? How did you manage this sort of very surprising and different direction? Like, did it feel like a lot to manage, or was it just a natural fit?
Yeah, it was when I was just developing characters at the beginning, just even before writing, because there were so many things I needed to talk about. I needed a structure. I needed acts, of course, just like you would in a screenplay. And when I was developing characters, I knew very early on that the character of Eugenie would be a medium. Does that translate in English? Okay. Because that would connect her to Genevieve's wound, and that from a narrative point of view, I needed something to connect the two of them, and just Eugenie being able to see what Genevieve suffers from, or what is her deep pain that she's been hiding for, I don't know, 20, 25 years. That was the element that would bring them together, and would also just totally affect Genevieve, and just have her question everything. I didn't specifically wanted to write a ghost story, just as I didn't want to write a feminist story. I just didn't want to label it anything. I just wanted to try and talk about these women. So I did not have any subject or any name in mind when I was writing about it. But like I said, this is so inspired by real events, and this is that I needed to have such a realistic element about, the hospital and the methods of treatments, and the pathologies, or the different illnesses that women suffered from. That this spiritualism element would also bring, a different element and a different theme of the book that I enjoyed also, because it was not this was not meant, of course, to be a historical novel, but I also wanted to have this theme that just basically interests anyone, even if you do believe or not believe. And this is not the book, obviously, it is not about is Eugenie crazy or not. To me, I really wanted her to have this thing, and to make it clear that she does see the dead, and she does talk to spirits. But again, it was a way for me to just strictly speaking about narration and storytelling, for the main nurse, for Genevieve, to undergo such a huge character development for her, and to question everything, and to have a moral and psychological and spiritual journey all throughout the book. So it was one of the themes that I just, it was clear to me that I wanted to have that in the book, but I didn't want it to make it too explicit or too overly present, because I know that it perhaps it would have put off readers, and that was not the intent. The intent was, again, the women, this time and place, and this hospital. But I really enjoyed what I like is frontiers, and just thin lines between worlds. And when I was just researching and writing the book, it was very clear that this was all about crossing lines, between the dead and the living, and the outside world and the inside world, and who is crazy and who is not. And it was all about blurring the lines, and just playing with it, and just questioning everything, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, I thought it was such a nice touch with you have the walls of the Salpêtrière. They're like, they are so heavy. This whole book is just, you just feel the weight of these walls all the time, and the women are constantly on either one side of the wall or another. Or if they're not in the Salpêtrière, they're in a house, like Eugenie's mom. She's so suffocated in her own house that, I mean, do we ever hear her speak? Oh, I don't. She's almost not there. But yeah, she's just wander. She's a ghost herself, you know, so it just, you have so many walls, and then you have a character that she can pass through them with this sort of like, just it lifts all the barriers that you've drawn, and it sort of, you know, turns the novel on its head. And it's just such a nice, it's a nice touch. It really it lightens it, and it complicates the whole thing. And especially because you have Charcot, the whole premise of it is that Charcot can see what's wrong with women, right?
Yes.
Like he can, and yet Eugenie can actually see, like you say, Eugenie can actually see this. She can actually see it, and she's locked up in the she's incarcerated. But Charcot is in charge of everything, and he claims that he can see exactly what she actually can see. So it's really it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. Yeah. I suppose I was hoping that we could ask if you're working on anything now. That's a personal question, I would say. I'm personally interested in this question.
Yes,
But,
I am. Yes. I'm working on the second novel, and it's just taking some time. So it's a work in progress.
is it historical as well? Like, are you continuing that interest, or?
I'm very interested about, of course, history and historical events, but it is inspired by a historical figure, but I can't talk more about it until my publisher has read it, and then, you know, once he's read it and he's fine with it, I will be able to talk about it. But yeah, I just but it will not happen in some ancient times. It will happen in nowadays, but again, the date is just really unclear. It could happen today, just like it could happen 20 years ago. So I just leave that open to the time zone.
Yeah, it's interesting how, so you're continuing this sort of balancing research and
Yes.
and your own. I mean, so I guess going back to the beginning, I forgot to ask. So you said you read newspapers and biographies of Charcot, but also I think like there's a long history of photographs as well. Were you working with the photographs of women, right?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. You're totally correct. There are many photographs dating back from this time when Charcot became head of the historical ward in the late 19th century. He actually asked services from a photographer to photograph these women, because he really wanted to capture the exact moment a woman would go into a fit or into a crisis. So it's very easy to find the many photographs of this time and place, even in a Google search. And it was so helpful to me to have these faces and to really have these women in front of me, and just being able to see them and to see them sometimes in the beds and how they would be dressed, and just to see their different faces. Most of them to me don't really seem that ill, or they just, they looked so beautiful and so sensitive and so inspiring. So that was the, besides the newspaper articles and the biographies, etc. It was just I guess my main source of inspiration, and what was most helpful to me was these photographs of those women. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but then you have this scene of the photographer, just really a tiny little scene where the photographer comes, and I don't know if you intended this, but it feels like uncomfortable. Like it's almost like you're working from these photographs, like they're so evocative, but it's also like for like you read it and you're like, oh, he's taking pictures of like, that doesn't see, it's like this interesting line that you're walking again too. Like we know that there are these, that we're also looking, like we're also observing these women, and yet when we see someone from the outside come and observe them, you're like, oh, what are we all doing here, sort of thing. It's really, really interesting, that scene.
Yeah, what's ironical is that nobody wanted to see these women, but at the same time, everybody wanted to see them. So, but within a space where they would not threaten the public. So most of those, many women in this hospital were sent away by their families. So it was, society didn't want to see them. Their own families didn't want to see them. Their own husbands sometimes didn't want to see them. But at the same time, there was such a curiosity and such an interest in these women, and it's so ironical and so contradictory, you know, to have these two elements colliding, because they were photographed a lot, which is very intrusive. You know, a photograph is very intrusive unless you do agree to that. They were not seen as even patients, they were just seen as crazies. That's the term that, you know, we would use to them. They were put on display during the Madwomen's ball, or during Charcot's lessons, you know, where, you know, he would put them into a trance or hypnosis, and they would sort of perform for male audiences. So they were constant, not patients, but subjects, you know, in the eyes of men mainly. And they were just there to respond to the public's interest and to the public's curiosity. It was just, it's such a shame that, you know, this the late 19th century to me is so great and so rich in literature and art and music production at the time. But, you know, within Paris, we were incapable of taking care of our women and our mothers and our daughters. So it's such a complex time, and again, an ironical way of seeing things at the time. But yeah, the photographies are very sometimes disturbing to watch, and sometimes very evocative of the time.
Oh, you really feel that in the book, like both of those things. It's really, and it makes you uncomfortable, and then you like read the next page, and then you have to consider yourself a little bit. It's great. But I think too, it's really, you feel it with Charcot's lecture when he goes too far, and you can feel the danger that is with these women, right? To the danger that they're running, just being observed, right? Like that can, it can feel sort of innocuous because you have the photographer come in and just take the pictures. But then you also, you show the other side of the sort of the danger that these women are in, sort of by putting themselves up for observation. And the sad thing is that you also have the scenes with, you know, Louise on the street. Like, observation is dangerous for women, like if they're on the street, you know, just walking around. I mean, you see that it's not just Louise, it's many, you know, many of your characters, but then also, well, okay, so they come into the hospital and then they're still under observation, and it's even potentially more dangerous. So it's really, I think the photography part was just really those images, you can feel them in the book, like though you can really feel that they're sort of in the background. It's really good.
Thank you. Yeah.
Gosh, I'm trying to think. Did you think about the well, is there a question that you haven't, that you feel like people aren't touching on in these books? Is there something, I'm trying to think, but is there something people are missing?
No, you know, it's what's great is that I wrote the book, and once, you know, you're a writer as well, and so you know about it. Once it's out, I mean, there's really nothing you can do, and it's just up to each reader to take their story and make it into their own. And so I'm always interested in how, you know, sometimes I get asked, what do you want readers to take from this novel? And I don't want readers to take anything. It's up to readers to take something in this novel, and in every novel, actually. And it's just how it talks to each and every one of them, and how it appeals to them, and how they identify with it, and how they connect with it. Is what matters, and what's so beautiful. So I
read that. I read something that this is going to test my French, but because I did read an interview with you in French, so it's maybe completely wrong. But I thought that you said that the definition of an artist or art had something to do with mediums itself, like the artist was as an intermediary, the artists themselves. Is that
oh my God, you read that one? Yes. I see where this is from. Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, no, I thought that just looking at that interview along with you, Jenny, I just wondered if you feel like she's your main character, and she's a medium. And then you have this sort of link with the art, and I just wondered if you felt that there was a link between Eugenie and art, or if art offered a similar avenue as what you're sort of presenting spiritualism as, if it's sort of that side door situation, or I just thought it was interesting to read that you talking about artists or art as a medium, and when you just wrote a book about a medium. So
yes, it's that's very interesting. Whether you believe it in it or not, but the idea is that mediums are just passing on information. They're not inventing anything. They're just acting as, I would say, bridges or links, or it's just so. And I was not exactly talking about this, but the relation is actually very interesting. I think in this interview was the last question that they ask everyone is, what is the definition of an artist? And to me, it's less about creating actually than just passing on information that comes from somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but it's about bringing forward and bringing forth a story, characters, ideas, feelings, and it's less about inventing them really, than just bringing them forward and trying to bring them to readers or to an audience. So I really see the artist less as someone where everything comes from, or a creator, or but it's not, let me find the right way to say it. It's the artist, it's not where it begins. It just it's just an I know I'm going to say this really bad, intermediary.
Yeah, an intermediate. Yeah, an intermediate.
Yeah, an intermediate. Yes. Between two worlds, and between two information, and between two audiences, and between the past and the present, and the invisible and the visible. That's
that makes
my
sense.
Definition.
Reading it is like what you're saying about these light. You have such a light touch. You don't feel, you don't feel you reading. You feel the characters.
Yes. That's nice. Yeah, I really wanted the reader to walk alongside them, and just be next to them all along the book. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Thank you both so much. This has been so entertaining so far. I'm always like, I wish people could sometimes see my face in the background during things. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the thing that we miss about in-person events, right? But this has been such an engaging conversation. And we do have some questions. So the first one is actually for both of you. And so Kira, in order for you to answer it, you might need to give us a brief background of Little Bandage Days for people who don't know about it. But both of your books involve, Kira and Victoria, both of your books involve kind of really complex female characters, right? As well as complex male characters, I guess, too. We don't want to discredit them. But so the question is, did one of your characters, and it doesn't have to be one of the female characters, did one of your characters ever give you a hard time when you were writing them? Like, who did you struggle with the most, or caught you off guard at some point where you're like, I don't know where to take you? Or did that not happen at all? And Victoria, maybe you can go first, and then Kara, you can give us background and answer.
I guess the characters I had trouble with were the real characters, just like Dr. Charcot, because since he existed, I didn't want to have him say anything that he wouldn't have said in his lifetime. I really wanted to respect also his character and his identity and his name. So that's why there are very few scenes with him. Well, first of all, because I wanted to talk about the women, of course, but he was this distant figure that most of the women never really saw. But again, since he existed, I really tried to find the right balance between what he would have said according to my research and his reputation at the time, and what people thought of him, and what people who were critical of him were saying of him. So I really tried to respect that, and not not disrespect his figure, of course. So that just was a little bit tricky to find, I would say. Yeah.
I was wondering that because I feel like with how much we've changed our viewpoints on things, it's like,
yes,
definitely as a reader, like going into it, you're already like, I have feelings about this man.
Yes.
So like, can you imagine trying to write him without like trying to put your bias onto him? Yeah.
Exactly.
Kira, do you want to give us a brief overview of Little Bandage Day? Because I know I could, but you're going to do it better than I do.
I think this question, actually, it's pretty easy to give a background in the context of this question because
that's what I was
wondering. Character. And so I think when I was writing it, there's just only one character in the book, and that's part of the premise of it is she doesn't let anybody else talk.
Ever.
And she did give me trouble, but it's mostly because she just was talking all the time, and she was talking, and I just had like it was weird. I would send people an email, and it would be like, no, that's not what I sound like at all. She just was so overwhelming to me that she annoyed me. She was very intrusive, I have to say.
Yeah, but she
like I had a hard time dealing with everything at the time because she was just so no. She was. It was always pretty clear what was going to happen. Like as far as like, and almost nothing happens, and there's only one character. So I mean, make it sound.
I mean, it just
I'm not marketing, so. But yeah, no. I mean, I think she was just all the time. She was very intrusive. But yeah.
Yeah, she's a complex one. She's like you can't look away, but you're also like uncomfortable.
She's really stressful. You're kind of like, okay.
She actually reminded me, I don't know if either of you have read Mrs. March, but it's very similar of like very different, not at all like the same story, but like very similar of like it's just her internal dialogue all the time, and you're just it's a lot. Okay, and this is a question for both of you, whoever wants to answer it first. Is there something that was edited out of your book that you still think about? Doesn't necessarily mean that you like feel like it shouldn't have been edited out, but is there just like something that still like comes to mind kind of, or was like a major part of the editing process for you?
Would you like to go first, Kira?
Sure. I mean, I think for me, it was interesting. I think at the beginning, there's those italicized sections where she's just really gone, like she's really lost it. Italicized sections, and those like the request was to cut those down like pretty early. It was like, yeah, these are cool, but like a lot less, please. And I was like, okay, that's fair. So like I think it was just more that it was that needed to be dialed back, and like I thought that was really fair. I loved the process of having it be edited. I thought that was the process of having it be edited was like what made slogging it out myself, like being like, what am I doing spending all my time on this? Like it's just like such a waste. It was like that process just made it all really worth it, because then it just seeing other people like explain to you how you should be doing it was amazing. I was so happy about that. So yeah.
So you found it helpful actually to have,
every suggestion I was like, yes, thank you. Yes, okay. Thank you. Also, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. To me, I just, like I said, I just drew a very detailed structure of the novel at the very beginning, right before I began writing anything. I really stuck to this plan, and I didn't really edit anything out because everything seemed quite important. But I worked like 3 months on this before writing it, but I don't recall editing something really big out. And no, I just really stuck to the plan. Yeah.
Oh.
I feel like so many authors would love to have that story.
Yeah, no, that is not my second experience with the second novel, so I guess this was exceptional.
This is like the first child, and the second child is giving.
Yes, exactly.
Another thing that has been, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but something that's been very cool in virtual events, while we wish that we were getting to do in person, we're seeing authors in conversations with each other that we haven't necessarily seen before, and we're getting like some kind of background that we wouldn't potentially always be getting. And so Kira, you talked about how like you read this book as part of like a class for French class and other stuff. But I just was wondering, like, if either of you or both of you have different author communities and what those communities have been like for you. I know sometimes authors exchange books with each other and that's how we get some of these blurbs to have an understanding, some of the early copies, but also just authors who like meet virtually on Twitter. There's lots of conversations happening of like what your communities look like. So just like, do you have an author community? And if you do, like, what has that been like for writing a book? And some people I know develop them after their first book. So all of that to say, whoever wants to answer that. Oh my gosh.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I don't think I have one.
I was gonna feel.
Yes. I don't know how your publishing experience was. I guess it all depends on the publishing experience. I know that in Paris, the most important season is the fall season for publishing. You have 500 books that are published at the same time, and it's just such a huge thing with many festivals and many bookshop events, and all the literary prizes happen at this time, and it's for 3, 4, 5 months sometimes, but really for 3 months you're just meeting authors. But it's so there are so many things happening, and it's so quick that you barely have time to exchange anything with them. And very few authors are actually on social media. I mean, you have some of them, but it's just, I don't. So just to answer your question, to me, my experience was I just got to meet so many wonderful writers, and it was sometimes such a lesson to talk with some of them. But it just, we don't stay in touch. We lose touch, and then we see each other again in the new fall season when it's publishing time. But it just all happens so quick, and it's just there are so many events that it's very difficult to keep track and to keep contact with each other. So, but that's how it happens in France. But I guess I've only published one novel. Maybe in 5 years I have a huge authors community, and but we'll see in a few years. I don't know how it's been for you, Kira. But
I wouldn't know. I'm just in my little Swiss village, so
yeah.
I had one event that I went to, and then it's hard. It's like the pandemic has lasted so long; it's hard to remember. But I think I had one event, and then pretty much there was the pandemic. So, but I think actually, it would be great to like meet people and do a lot, but also, I think it's probably nice to sort of not constantly be faced with your own whatever you like. I think it would be stressful if I had to constantly sort of deal with it. Like the book, you're like, oh, it could have done so much better.
Yeah,
I could have, right, or whatever you feel like your little insecurities about it are. I can just ignore it. So yeah.
That's so interesting to hear how. That's an interesting part of like this question is we're always hearing about different people's experiences, and especially Victoria, to hear about like what it's like for publishing in Paris. Because as I said, as I believe I read in your bio, like, it's received great reception in France, and you've received numerous awards. So it makes sense that it's been like a huge season for you. But so thank you both for sharing that. I think it's always fun for readers to hear about the other side that we don't see. The luxury that we get of like, we get a greatly, wonderfully produced and written book. We don't know anything about what happened on the side to get it there. And I think for us, it's better that way. But that's awesome. That's cool to know. Okay, so we always ask at the Novel Neighbor some quick rapid fire this or that questions at the end. I realized my first question, I'm curious to see if this even exists in France and Switzerland. But so the first one, so I'll give you two options and you have to choose one. Or if you say neither, the rule is you just have to provide an alternative answer. So these are all themed for autumn. Pumpkin spice lattes or mulled wine, which would you choose? But my question is also, do pumpkin spice lattes, like, I just expect them to exist in the entire world, but I don't actually know if they do.
We got them in Geneva, I think, a couple of years ago. It's a big deal. But I'm more wine, but I'll take a pumpkin spice latte as well. But I go with wine.
Yeah, I guess we have them in Starbucks here. We do have Starbucks. So yeah, I'll go with pumpkin spice because I'm French, but I don't drink wine. So yeah, I know.
Scandalous stuff here.
I know. I know. I might lose citizenship very soon.
Yeah, you'll get some questions. Okay. Bobbing for apples or pumpkin carving? Which someone reminded me when I asked this earlier, like, can you imagine now with COVID how gross bobbing for apples is? I mean, like, obviously it's not happening, but like, I was like, I can't believe we used to do that, at least in the US.
It is the most awkward experience. I choose watching other people bob for apples and then carving.
I love that option. You'll watch other people do it? Yeah.
I don't even know what bobbing for apples is.
I would love to describe it to you, and you shouldn't know. And there's a reason that it's weird. Basically, there's this like Halloween tradition. I guess like autumnal, but I always think of it as like a Halloween tradition. But you basically fill up like a big barrel with water.
Apples in the water, but there's something more.
You have to like stick your face in it and try to bite onto the apple.
Okay.
Literally choosing voluntarily to stick your face in water and try and catch an apple, meaning your mouth has also been open, so your saliva is mixing with other people's. Like, how gross is that? That this was like a cute fall tradition that we started.
Yeah.
How did this even come to be, especially close to Halloween or fall? I see the pumpkin carving, but
Kara, do you know? Is this just a weird American tradition that we have zero context for? I'm guessing I don't even know. I know it used to. Well, I'll give you.
It's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I'm like well. This is clearly a highly Googleable thing. Apparently, it dates back to the Roman invasion of Britain when the conquering army merged their own celebrations with Celtic festivals.
Oh, okay.
So it's a weird British thing. We don't have to claim it as a weird American thing.
That makes sense with Halloween, I guess. Isn't it Celtic?
Yeah.
Halloween?
I guess it's been an autumn tradition. Yeah.
So it's not a weird American tradition. We don't have to feel bad.
That's right. Would you choose? Are you choosing that, or are you choosing the pumpkin carving?
No, definitely watching other people do it. It's amazing. Their whole face, their whole head goes in. I mean, it's fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Little kids especially are like a mess when they're trying to do it. It's great. Yeah, it's good. Okay, Frankenstein or Dracula?
Ooh, toughest one yet. Do you have an answer?
I loved Frankenstein. The book itself was such a beautiful discovery. I really didn't like Dracula at all. I was really bored watching it, but Frankenstein it really broke my heart. It was so much more than what we made it to be. The huge monster. It's so much more complex than that, and it's just someone who basically wants to be loved and find affection from others. The book was so incredible. I would love to read it many times again. So Frankenstein, definitely. Yeah.
Gosh, I love Frankenstein too, but I guess because I'll vote Dracula because you already voted Frankenstein, so that's right.
Yeah.
That scene of the castle. It's the first section in the castle. It's the creepiest thing I've ever read.
That's true. It's true.
I loved it. I mean, talk about like you have like this really creepy guy who's also like ironing your sheets. Like I will read about that any day.
Yeah.
I think
it's true.
Fitting, Victoria, that you chose Frankenstein though, because the first time I ever, oh my gosh, now I'm gonna get it. No, this is such a long explanation for something that's such a little payoff. But I love Frankenstein because then I discovered who Mary Shelley's mom was, and Mariah, or the Vindication of the Rights of Women, is the first time that I was exposed to this idea that they would just put women away for a lot of different things. So a little bit different than the Madwomen's Ball, right? But it feels full circle, kind of.
Yes.
It feels appropriate. Okay, and final question, which is perfect, Kara. You brought this up earlier, and I was like, this is one of the things I was like, oh my gosh, I want to just like jump in now and be like, here's this question. Okay. Obviously, ghosts are in the Madwomen's Ball. Do you believe in ghosts? Yes or no?
I think the question is more interesting than the answer. I'm not trying to avoid that, but I think it's worth questioning it, and it just the fact that it doesn't have a precise answer, and that it's up to each and everyone, and that we have the possibility of changing our minds about it, or just believing it or not. But at the same time, perhaps at some point in our lives, just to be able to envision it. I really like questions that are open and that don't have a very specific or defined answer, and it's just it's such a wide theme and subject that it's an interesting conversation to have. So yeah, the question is more interesting than the answer, I guess. Yeah.
I guess I would say no, and then also that I've been 100% convinced that every time I move into a new house, it's haunted. So like I want to say no, and then I'm also really afraid every time I move into a new house.
That's so perfect. That literally just proved Victoria's point.
That's good.
It's been very interesting to incorporate that into kind of this. Ghosts are not just Halloween related, right? But we tend to think of them most around this time of year. And it's been very interesting to hear different people's answers, even amongst just like our customers. Like we've just started to ask this question more and more. And there's all kinds of like, I feel like a lot of people, to your point, Victoria, of like how interesting the question is, like everyone has a different take on what ghost in and of itself actually, how that's defined, and like what you, because like, somebody brought up, if you're asking if I believe like energies are left behind after like intense emotions, like if that's your definition of a ghost, which is some people's definition, they're like, yes. Do I believe in the like kind of, they were comparing that versus like believing in like a haunted ghost, to your point, Kira, of like somebody who's like haunting and causing harm, or being around for that in more of that like Halloween type sense. So it's been very different. And a lot of people who are like, I believe both of those things are true. I believe there's a full spectrum of paranormal activity that goes back to all kinds of things. So it's been really interesting. So thank you for entertaining those this or that questions. And thanks to everyone who has been watching with us and participating. I just want to send a reminder that if you haven't already purchased your own copy of the Madwomen's Ball, we have them in stock. And something I didn't even mention at the top of this, not only do we have the book in stock, but Victoria was so kind as to send us signed book plates. So you can receive a signed book plate along with your purchase. And that makes it extra cool, in my opinion. So thank you both, Kira and Victoria. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation. It has been a great way to spend a Saturday afternoon for those of us in the Midwest. And hopefully it was a great way for you to spend your evening. Because what time is it? Are you both in the same time zone? If Switzerland and France?
Right now in Paris, it's 10 p.m.
So same, yeah.
Okay.
The same. So yeah, it was a very nice evening. It was such a nice conversation, Kira. Thank you so much, and thank you, Stephanie, for having us. I just really enjoyed this time with you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you both. Have a great rest of your evening, and everyone who's watching, have a great rest of your evening as well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.